mental, what's it called? Snap oversteer?
Yeah,
you're a Corvette guy, right? So you take a corner and you start to drift.
Yes.
So you counter steer to correct, and then all of a sudden you catch traction because you did the wrong thing. Maybe you lifted on your throttle, or worse, you hit the brakes, which is what's intuitive, but is the wrong thing to do.
Bingo.
And all of a sudden, whap, you go the other way, and your Mustang is just crashed into everyone at Cars and Coffee.
Bingo.
Get those words!
All right, welcome back to Bid Nerds, everyone. My name is JP. I am your host. Today is we have a special guest. Things are a little different here at the Rami Studio in the Container Park in downtown Las Vegas. Today, usually, normally I would have my partner Michael Deeb here. We're going to talk about cars, the most interesting car of the day from all the automotive enthusiast auction sites. But we're doing something a little different. We have the good fortune of having someone who I think can maybe give us some insight on what's going on in the market and how things may affect the value of classic enthusiast cars that we talk about every day. Today we have I don't know, how do I describe, the coolest guy I know. See, you already moved you up 2 slots. He's a political commentator. He's an economic watchdog. Maybe it's the opposite of that. I don't know.
I don't know. I have a very mixed bag career path right now, so who knows what I'm doing. But
there it is. There's the voice of the host of the Liberty Lockdown podcast, a podcast that you absolutely have to check out, Clint Russell.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. This is very much outside of my normal realm of expertise, but I think that there will be enough crossover where I can bring some interesting ideas to people, hopefully.
I think so. I think, sometimes when we do this show, we get in, the show is called Bid Nerds, so we nerd out on some really just the craziest stuff about, when a door handle was built or who the designer of a car was or horsepower or all that kind of
I will not
stuff.
be helping with any additional information in that regard.
Excellent. I'm not even going to bring up cars. Actually, you know what? I take that back. I'm going to bring up one car because just for the record, we asked Clint if he was a car guy. He's like, no. And I'm like, well, what kind of car do you drive? And tell everybody what kind of car you drive.
2022 Corvette.
Come on, man.
I'm still not a car guy. I just have a nice car. That's it.
Not only do you have a nice car, you have maybe one of the most capable sports cars of all time.
Well, that's why I bought it. Honestly, I was never even a vet guy. I was a sports car guy. My first car was a Nissan 300ZX back in the 90s.
Nice.
Absolutely loved that car. It was like dream car. But anyways, it broke down on me multiple times. The the timing belt went out, and because of the way the engine was devised, like all the pistons just
smashed
blasted
into each other, didn't they?
So that was cool. And then because I was a young kid who was in love with his car and not actually thinking rationally, I spent $7,000 like remaking the motor. Oh, such a bad investment. Looking back, but you're a kid, you do dumb stuff. So
people ask me all the time. They know that I'm a car enthusiast, and people are like, "Oh, what Porsche should I get?" I'm specifically kind of a Porsche guy, and they're always like, "Oh, what car should I get? I tell them the worst possible thing you could do is get into cars, just especially Porsches. Just take up heroin or just about any other thing. Endeavors.
Have you tried hard drugs yet?
Seriously, it's a better investment. If you start adding up all the money over the years, the engines and forget about it. Okay, so you have an awesome car. What color is it?
It is. It's kind of an homage to the Chargers. So it's
okay.
It's like the baby blue with the yellow racing stripe.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, it's pretty,
is it like a
nice.
Gulf blue then? Is that what?
I don't know. I think it has a name, but I forget it, to be honest.
Is that a special edition car of some sort?
I custom made it, but I don't know if it's like all that special.
When you say you custom made it, did you do it at the in the dealership? You custom ordered it.
Yeah.
Mental, maybe you can, and by the way, I'm calling out to our good friend Mental Ward, our engineer for the day. Thanks for being here, Mental, on short notice. Maybe at some point you can dig up a photo of a C8 configured in that way. Did you buy it brand new?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was on a waiting list for 2 years to get it. And the lockdowns obviously destroyed the supply chain, which made the delivery extremely delayed. So I could certainly talk a little bit about, perhaps why that happened. For those that are totally unfamiliar with me, I started my show called Liberty Lockdown because I was very opposed to the lockdowns, and because of my economic background, even above and beyond my philosophical libertarian leanings, I realized that we were going to have a tremendous amount of negative consequences that rippled through the economy. And I just wanted people to be aware that, like, this is not strictly a trade-off of, like, human lives. This is going to be ultimately the economy keeps us alive too, and that is not being discussed at all. So I feel like that was the early stages of my show, alongside with ranting about how insane everything was. But now, because also, for those that don't know, I was a mortgage broker, a private money mortgage broker. I managed a couple $100 million in investor capital, and as a fiduciary for them and an underwriter, I have a really good understanding of the real estate market and the investing market more broadly. So that's kind of been how I got into all of this. It's weird. I never thought I'd do that. I was an entrepreneur. I was very successful. I loved what I was doing. And then the whole world went insane. That's kind of how I feel.
Yeah, for sure. And I've really enjoyed watching your podcast. I watch it regularly, and I love seeing you just keep getting bigger and bigger guests.
It's amazing.
Your depth of knowledge just increases exponentially, it seems like, and it's really great. I love hearing your takes. We won't get into super political stuff here, guys. I promise this isn't a political show. This really is about markets, and again, how that's going to affect your car. I'm going to keep bringing it back to your car.
Okay.
Just for a moment.
I never get to talk about the Corvettes. This is cool.
Well, yeah, so okay, it's a 2022, so that car probably came out in 21. Yeah, how long did it take from the time you ordered it to actually get it, and when did you order it, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I was on a wait list for 2 years,
okay,
but it took, I think it was 5 months from the time they finally took my order, and then it was delivered. So I received it, I believe it was November of 21.
Okay. All right. And then did they charge you a big premium over list, or were you able to get it at list?
Because I had been on the wait list for so long, I ended up getting it I got the fully loaded everything. So, but it was slightly under six figures. So
okay. Oh yeah. So you got it at totally list. Yeah. Did you set up your order before the lockdown, before the pandemic?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Long time prior.
Way before that.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay. So that's great. Because even before the pandemic, the Porsche world, if you were in something like a GT3 or any of the special stuff, even before everything went crazy, people were still paying $50,000, $100,000 over list for some of their high-end cars. That was not uncommon because a lot of those higher-end cars, particularly with Porsches or Ferraris or whatever, if you can buy one at list, you can usually flip it immediately for $100,000, $200,000.
I had someone offer me $130,000 for my car when I got it, and I was like, no.
Yeah, because how are you going to get another one, right? What are you going to do?
Exactly. I am actually on a wait list, though, for a second one, so I may flip that. We'll see.
Okay. You're going to flip the second one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think so.
My Z06?
Tell me it's a Z06. You got a Z06? You get the...
No, unfortunately. Well, maybe I could do that. I don't know, because I haven't placed the order yet, because I'm still on the wait list. So, they could reach out to me at any time and say, hey, you're now in line for this one, too. Because I put a $1,000 deposit at a dealership in Orange County as well as in San Diego, which is where I used to live. I'm now a Miami guy. But. Got
it. How is the car culture down there in Miami? I know you're not a car culture guy, but your
wild.
Corvette is kind of perfect for that.
Oh yeah. It's weird because I think driving that car pretty much anywhere else in the country other than, Hollywood or some spot like that, I would stand out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
I'd just be like, okay, this guy, this guy is he's trying way too hard. But then I drive around in Miami and it's like, oh, there's another one.
Yeah.
There's another one. There's another one. And then almost every other car is, 2 or 3 times. A Lamborghini, Ferrari, everything is everywhere you turn. So,
all right. So we have seen during the lockdown, let's get a kind of, what would you take? I was about to go into my analysis of what's happened to the car world because of everything that's happened, but who wants to hear from me? Everybody who's already heard me. What do you think is going on? That car prices are out of whack right now, specifically enthusiast cars. I'm going to bring this up for you just because I'm not sure if you've ever considered this. classic enthusiast cars kind of fit in a different category than, say, used cars or even new cars, right?
Sure.
So typically our world, we're talking about cars like 70s, 80s, 90s, air-cooled Porsches, 911s, old Ferraris, anything with, you know, a manual is something that's just shot up in value. Typically what you see happen in the classic car world is guys that are my age, in our early 50s and 40s, as we get older, and we come into having disposable income, our kids are maybe done going to college, our houses are paid off. Typically guys our age tend to go back and say, all right, what car did I want in high school?
Right.
And that's what moves the bubble. So all of like the 60s and 70s muscle cars, all the old Corvettes, and I think I was probably conceived in a Corvette, by the way. But somehow I got into Porsches. All those 70s muscle cars are taking a dump. And like the Model Ts and all that kind of stuff, almost, I'm not going to say worthless, but unless it's something really, really, really special and rare, old Buicks and stuff like that just going away, because all those guys are retiring and they need their money.
Right. That makes sense.
So given that piece of information, I'm sure you understand it and maybe have considered it, but it's something that, you know, is kind of unique to this particular asset class, unlike, say, Bitcoin or a stock or anything that has its own motivations. How do you give me your assessment of what's happened to the market over the last couple of years, specifically because of the reaction to the pandemic?
Sure.
And how do you think that will affect asset classes in general? And do you have a particular opinion on how it might affect something like classic enthusiast cars, weirdo cars?
No, I think there's going to, I mean, we're already experiencing a tremendous amount of the consequences of the lockdowns. There's also, you know, the trade war that Trump began with China that made some of the chips, because these cars are very, the new cars that we're developing in particular, have a lot of advanced technology that require that type of stuff. And oftentimes there's only one supplier of it. So if you've now put on tariffs, that creates a cost increase, or in this case, because of lockdowns, it created a lot of shortages across the supply chain. So that certainly added to the cost or the price increases that people were forced to pay. And you saw that in the Corvette market in particular. I remember it was like there was some dealerships that were requiring $20,000 above sticker, and I had never seen anything like that, because I had never been in the market for a higher end car. So I didn't know if that was normal or not. And I was talking to them and they're like, nah, not really normal. Like this is kind of unusual. But I mean, I think that to make this unique or more informational for your audience, I think it would be important to discuss the inflationary pressures that have occurred, and this may get a little wonky, so bear with.
Trust me, I've lost viewers because I've gotten into this inflation thing. It's
okay.
It's mind-bending, but I'm really interested in your take on this.
Yeah. So because not only did we mess with the supply chain, and obviously when it comes to prices, you have an equilibrium that you're trying to find where you have a appropriate amount of supply and demand, and they meet, and there's equilibrium. That's where the price is ultimately set. Because they flooded the system with trillions and trillions of dollars. In fact, I think it was $7 trillion in 2020 alone. Insane. Yeah. I'll leave that aside. But then you also
by members of both parties.
Yes.
This is not this guy did it or that guy did it. Let's be real. They all did it.
This was totally bipartisan in nature. So I'm not taking you down either a Trump or a Biden path here.
We don't want comments saying that we're one guy or another.
No, you're being screwed by both ends, just so you know. Yeah. So they have the $7 trillion that gets printed and lent out to their favorite crony corporations. But then also because of the lockdowns, you have supplies that are screwed up because the supply chain is broken. So you have decreasing supply and you have increasing demand, which obviously, if you're going to find equilibrium in that, you're going to have a much higher price. And that's exactly what occurred. So I think what's interesting about the way this can tie into the collector's market, and obviously I've never even thought about this because this is not a market that I play in, but it would make perfect sense that you would see people looking for inflation hedges in collectibles. So I know that the art market in particular had a huge bull run over the past couple of years as people were kind of expecting inflationary pressures to come in. They were right. And I would imagine, you can tell me, did you see a similar price hike in collectors?
Absurd.
Okay.
Like an absurd bubble has been created.
Look at that. I don't even know, and I know.
Yeah.
So makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and the crazy thing is that these prices have, there was a big, huge bubble, and unlike crypto, unlike securities, unlike stock market, unlike almost every asset classes, we've already seen pretty big bursts or at least collapses, right? I mean, some stocks are as much as 90% down, right? I mean, we still haven't seen the tech class really take a crap yet. We're when will the shoe drop on Apple and Google and all those guys? Or will it at all? In the securities markets, are we bouncing along the bottom? Have we seen the bottom, or will the tech sector, because that's the last place that can go, right? I mean, do you have a take on
Sure.
that?
Yeah, I would argue that, unfortunately, the way our market has been structured throughout my lifetime, it's gotten really extreme, is that investment capital floods almost entirely predicated off of what Federal Reserve policy is.
Yes.
So because interest rates are being hiked very aggressively by the Federal Reserve, you will see, I don't think we've seen anywhere near the bottom in any asset class at all.
Yeah.
Unless, and this is the key, unless the Federal Reserve sees what I see, sees the blow up in Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank abroad and says, this is coming home if we don't reverse course, in which case they stop with quantitative tightening, they stop with the escalating interest rates, and they reverse course.
Well, they have stopped quantitative easing. I mean, they stopped buying bonds. They stopped
No, I know,
buying
but
all
I'm
that
saying
stuff,
quantitative
right?
tightening,
Tightening,
which is what they're doing
not
right
easing.
now.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
All
So if they were to reverse course and go back into a reduction of interest rates as well as quantitative easing,
they could kick the ball down. So Mental and I were having this conversation before you came in, and maybe you've talked about this on the show. I don't remember, but fixing inflation is kind of like fixing the hangover that you're experiencing here in Las Vegas, right?
Right now.
When you're drinking, the positive effects of drinking are great. Drink more, positive effects are great.
Yes.
But the more you
but there
drink,
are diminishing returns.
Sure, right. You get diminishing returns, and the negative effects of all that drinking, that increases, right? It's gonna, whatever the result to your drinking more is getting worse and worse and worse. You're gonna fall down and you're gonna sleep in a ditch. Your liver's gonna fail, or you're ultimately gonna die, right? So at some point you have to stop drinking.
Mm-hmm.
The positive effects of stopping the drinking don't happen immediately. They happen way later, and the pain happens right now. So there is no, in my opinion, incentive for any policymaker to try to fix this problem, because the only way you can fix inflation is by having the hangover right now.
Right.
The positive effects won't happen till later, and policymakers are only interested in what's going on right now.
Right, because they want the next election to go in their favor. I think that's a very fair analysis. The reason that this time might be different is because I'm going to play off your metaphor and take it to a very dark level.
Let's go.
I would imagine that a good comparison here is our economy is a alcoholic who has been binge drinking my entire life, and if you come off too rapidly, you get the DTs, the shakes, and you die. So while it's the appropriate thing to do, you can't do it too fast or you will break everything. So that is the fine line that the Federal Reserve and the central banks globally more broadly are trying to find. And in my experience, they have never found the appropriate balance. They have always gone at least either too far or too light when it comes to correcting the malinvestment that they've created in the economy. And I think they're going to do it again, unfortunately. And at this point, it looks like they're hiking too aggressively, and we're going to have what looks like a deflationary collapse. I think that the response on the back end will be that they will reverse course. It will have happened too late, so they'll have to reverse course very aggressively, and then we will have a hyperinflationary death of the dollar and fiat globally. So this is extremely wonky, and I apologize, but it's important for people to at least consider what I'm saying. If any of this makes sense, yeah. I hope it's helpful.
We'll bring it back to cars. Mental, what's it called? Snap oversteer? You're a Corvette guy, right? So you take a corner and you start to drift.
Yes.
So you counter steer to correct, and then all of a sudden you catch traction because you did the wrong thing. Maybe you lifted on your throttle, or worse, you hit the brakes, which is what's intuitive, but is the wrong thing to do.
Bingo.
And all of a sudden, whap, you go the other way, and your Mustang is just crashed into everyone at Cars and Coffee.
Bingo.
Well, and to follow both of your analogies, in those situations, you're chasing the car instead of controlling the car. And with these short-term policies, it sounds like people are chasing
yes.
economic reactions instead of controlling them.
Yeah. I mean,
Correct.
the Fed, let's face it, the Feds were like, oh, there's no inflation. Yeah, there was. Oh, it's transitory. No, it's not. Oh, well, we'll just, we'll raise the thing we'll raise it 50 bips, and then they raise it 150 bips. And then and the fact that they even call it bips, like, basis points. When us old guys remember when we were kids, our parents paid, double-digit percentage rates for mortgages.
Oh, yeah.
Now they've broken down a single percentage into 100 units of measurement. And that's just, come on, guys. We're not that stupid. I mean, maybe millennials are. But yeah, it's going to be a soft landing. No, well, maybe it's not going to be a soft landing. Oh, there's no recession. Yeah, it's just like, at what point do they just go, all right, we give up?
Yeah. Well, the issue is, like, these people genuinely believe that they're omnipotent. Like, you have I think it's 12 Fed governors that sit around a table in secret, mind you, and ultimately they release minutes so we can try and decipher what they're talking about. But it's really a secretive kind of cabal that decides the most important signal to the economy, which is interest rates.
Yeah.
And they also get to decide the quantity of currency that's circulating in the system. So they get both of these mechanisms. So I don't even blame them for feeling omnipotent, because that's an immense amount of power. But the issue is that it's an amount of power that no human beings can possibly hold without becoming deeply corrupted. And that's why it's my belief that it shouldn't exist. But setting that aside, because
it's like God mode in a video game.
Yes, exactly. It's like, is that even fun anymore? But yeah, it ultimately has created such terrible malinvestment, which just means investments that wouldn't be occurring if not for their behavior, that is so ever present. I mean, it's just everywhere you look. Like, I remember when they were talking about NFTs, which was the sale of art in the cryptocurrency type space, and I knew right then, I was like, this is the end of the bull market, because as soon as I see electronic art that's going for millions and millions of dollars, I was like, well,
I've seen way too much liquidity right now.
I've seen this before. I know exactly what's happening now.
I mean, it's like the .coms. And I mean, that's a whole other thing, the crypto thing. I'd love to have a conversation with you about that sometime. But okay, so cars, specifically the enthusiast cars. So as we've seen this kind of collapse in all these other asset classes, what we haven't really seen in the enthusiast classic cars is a big correction yet. And my take on it is that there's a little bit of a optimism bias when it comes to the enthusiasts. There's still people that have a little bit of extra money, and they're kind of like going, well, I know I'm losing money on just about everything else I can put my money into, but at least in this class, I get something cool.
Right.
And if the world ends, I can drive around the apocalypse in a really bitchin' 911.
Well, this is what's called relative strength. So basically, as everything else is going to hell in a handbasket, they're looking at that and going, well, it's not down as much. So what am I going to liquidate this for and put it into that's going to outperform it?
Yeah.
And I think many of them are probably concluding that they don't have enough guidance, clarity and guidance to actually make that shift. And it makes perfect sense, too, because the people that are going to be in that market in the first place are going to be those that have additional capital to deploy that the average person doesn't. So when a recession hits, they're probably going to be the last people that actually feel it in a real serious way, or like feel it to the extent where, like, okay, now I got to go sell my dream cars. Yeah. So I think that you'll only see a real bear market there if we end up in depression territory. Yeah. And hopefully we don't.
Well, we certainly saw that in 2008. I mean,
right.
But 2008 was a little bit different.
Yes.
In the sense, well, in a lot of senses, obviously, but when it comes to the classic car market, specifically with old Porsches, because old Porsches really kind of fit into that category of age bracket that I was telling you about.
Right.
Every kid my age had a 911 on their wall, or 930 or something like that. And they, like, in the 2008 crash, that stuff just went in the dump. Like you could buy a 930 911, like a 79 930 911 for like $30,000. That's a $150,000 car now. You could buy a 964 RS for around $30,000. I passed on one. I've told the story a million times. Biggest, stupidest mistake. It's a $200-something thousand car now. I mean, some of these cars have way outperformed the stock market and just about every other market class you can imagine, right? But they're still kind of hovering there. And we're looking at BAT results. My partner and I, we make predictions as to what we think the cars will sell for. And I'm always super bearish in the last couple of months. And he still kind of did. But he's been right more often than not. I'm just like, what? How?
I think
what is going on?
You're dealing with what Peter Schiff has dealt with for a very long time. You're not wrong. You're early.
Okay. Peter Schiff is a great example. I'm glad you brought him up because one asset class that like hasn't done anything throughout this entire fiasco is gold.
Yeah.
What the hell, man?
It's complicated. First off, there's paper contracts, which have basically detached the underlying asset from what people pay for it. So I think there's a lot of manipulation and am I allowed to cuss?
Yes.
There's fuckery afoot in that market. So I think that's part of it. Also, I think that the cryptocurrency space has absorbed much of the inflationary hedge investment parameters for especially you were talking about the demographic shift and how certain classic cars are more appealing to say your generation or mine than it was to our parents' generation, right?
Yeah.
I think it's the same thing here. Like gold and silver have fallen out of favor and they have been supplanted by Bitcoin, Ethereum, So I think it's similar.
Well, yeah, and I think access to, I mean, the barrier to entry for a brick of gold is pretty tough. Like it's actually hard to go out. I mean, have you ever gone out and tried to buy physical gold? It's not an easy thing to do at the moment.
I have a bunch of it, and it's a nightmare to move. I'll tell you that much. So there,
well, I mean, you have a big problem.
Yeah, there's a.
All right, let's find Clint's safe.
Most of it's silver, so it's not worth that much. Don't get crazy. But I mean, there's a real reason that a lot of people are viewing Bitcoin in particular as an improvement upon the best aspects of what gold and silver presented. And the biggest thing, in my opinion, or the biggest advantage that it has is it's weightless. You can transfer it instantly. There's the the barrier to entry is much easier. There's lots of reasons that I think that it could be argued that it's superior. We'll find out. It's very early.
A lot of effery going on in that realm as well. I mean, a completely unregulated, and I'm not a regulation guy. I mean, so I'm a pretty laissez-faire guy, but come on. A lot of wacky stuff going on in that world.
Well, and anytime you have trillions of dollars that are pumped into any economic system, you're going to see malinvestment that even strikes good assets. So like you could still see Bitcoin becoming the world reserve currency in the next 20 years. But in the interim, because you have the Federal Reserve and all the central banks more broadly that are manipulating the amount of currency that exists in the system, you're going to see malinvestment and booms and busts and all sorts of assets, including gold, silver, real estate, Bitcoin, all these quote unquote hard assets that are supposed to be hedges against inflation. It doesn't mean that there's just this parabolic rise in these asset classes. I hope that made sense.
Yeah. Well, like the inflation thing on assets too is hard for people to calculate. I'll use a car as an example. If you bought a 911 of some sort in say 2021 for $100,000, and now in 2022 you can still sell it for $100,000. People are like, oh yeah, that's been a safe bet. It's like, no, you lost 14%. And it's been really hard for people to wrap their heads around that. I think some of these prices that we're seeing on the auction sites, I think reflect a misunderstanding of real dollar terms. They think, oh yeah, I'm making money. People are flipping cars or whatever, and they're making 5 or 10%. But it's like, yeah, but that you're still at a loss if you factor that in from a real point of view.
Well, yeah, if you consider that we have 10% inflation annually.
Yeah. Or
then
worse,
you have
to calculate the way they,
of course.
They should. Yeah.
But you have to outdo that in a significant way, not to mention taxes on those gains. So like realistically, you need to be making 20% annualized return to be making a net positive return. This is why it's the most challenging investment environment of my life, and it's probably going to get harder, and that is disconcerting.
And you can't short cars. I haven't been able to figure out
I
a way
don't
to do
think
that.
so. Not any way I can figure out.
There was, a lot of people, there were, at the height of crypto, a lot of dealerships started advertising, we'll take crypto for cars.
Yeah, I remember.
And, it was like, I looked into a bunch of them and realized that none of them were actually taking crypto. What they were doing is they were converting it to cash.
Of course.
At the time. So you had a taxable moment there. And I always thought it'd be awesome if somebody set something up where you could just set up an exchange for just a literal transaction for crypto for cars.
Yeah.
I'm sure privateer or people were doing that privately here and there, but there was no mechanism to do it en masse.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing is like people want to believe that Bitcoin is going to be our savior, and God bless them. I hope they're right. But we're so far away from it really being something that we're trading in every day, all the time. You know, and until you get to that level, well, then the existing currency system has not been supplanted at all.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're learning is like much of this has been based off of faith and hope, as opposed to, okay, I can now buy my groceries in Bitcoin, so obviously I'm going to be more interested in this as a store of value.
Yeah.
So we're a ways off.
So you've got this deposit on this Z06, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know what it's on a new vet. I don't know. I think
whichever. Okay, so let's just say
I think I can bump it to a Z06. I think.
So given your take on where the market is going, are you gonna make that purchase? Are you gonna make that order? Do you think that in? Well, let me. How long do you think it would take to actually get that car? Let's say the dealership calls you tomorrow and says, "All right, you can execute on this essentially an option, right?" It's kind of what it is. What do you do at that point?
I think I would probably take it and I would sell my existing one because I could probably still make 20 or 30 grand on that.
Yeah.
Because I've only put 1,000 miles on it in a year.
Oh, jeez.
So if
He's not a car enthusiast. We got to put some miles on the thing. We're going to Florida. Mental gas up the RV.
He lives in Florida. There's not a lot of curvy roads there.
They don't call it Florida for nothing.
Well, I live and I work from home. I'm a professional podcaster, so I don't leave the house very often. So I don't drive all that much. But when I do, good God, do I love that car. It's such a great car. But yeah, if I was gonna do it, I probably wouldn't want both. So I would exchange one or the other. If I thought I could sell the Z06 for a huge premium, because I'm sure, having been on the wait list for 3 years now, I would imagine that there's a very significant wait list for the Z06.
Well, how long does it take to get that car once you execute the order?
Well, the first one was about 5 or 6 months. Yeah.
So let's say you can get it in 5 or 6 months. What do you think the market's going to be like in 5 or 6 months? Do you think it's going to be a positive? Do you think there's still a profit to be made on a car in 5 or 6 months?
I think so.
Okay.
Just strictly because there's such a unique demand in that particular space for that particular vehicle. And especially in Miami, there's still going to be some people with money that would like to invest in that. So I don't think I would have a problem with that, but that's not to say I couldn't be wrong. We could have the bottom fall out and
there's the hedge.
Sorry, I can't. This is what I do.
Maybe we figured out a way to short cars is that you have the vet, so you sell the one you have now.
Yeah, there you go.
And then, okay, that's it. All right. Well, what do you guys think? Are you guys getting scared, or are you still going to BAT every day and watching the auctions? Are you bidding on cars? Are you planning on adding a car to your stable? What do you think of inflation and how that's going to affect the market in the future? We definitely want to hear from you and get your opinion on what you guys are doing in the market. And we really do appreciate you guys, by the way. I know there's only 4 of you or whatever, but I know that you're spreading the word and you're growing the herd. Clint Russell, you got to check out his podcast, Liberty Lockdown, correct?
That's right. Yeah.
And where else can we find you?
Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts for the audio version, Spotify. I mean, I'm pretty much everywhere. Odyssey, YouTube. Just search Liberty Lockdown, you'll find me. And if any of this was appealing to your audience, if I didn't lose them going too deep on the economic side, I think if you listen to my show for a couple months, you would start to understand more of what I'm talking about. But it's the most tumultuous investment environment I've ever existed in, and I think that
anyone alive really has been.
Yeah, no, I think that's not even an understatement at all. So, and I think it's going to be rockier in 2023. I'm expecting the hardest investment year in my life. So, Hang in there, folks.
It'll be too late by the time this airs to promote it, but you're in town for Skank Fest?
I am, yeah.
Tell us about Skank Fest real quick before we go.
It's just this incredible stand-up comedy festival, 3.5 days, really. Dave Smith and Dave Attell and Tim Dillon and Ari Shaffir and like all of my favorite, cutting edge comedians, basically the entire lineup of the Joe Rogan Experience over the past 5 years.
You were hanging out with all those people.
I was
literally a half hour before he came slumming over here.
It was crazy.
Across the street.
I still feel like I'm living in a dream. It was completely surreal. I'm sitting there. I'm watching Big J Okerson's latest special, which I don't even know where it's going to be, maybe Netflix or something like that, but watching it get recorded live. I'm in the green room. I got David Tell here. I got Dan Soder chopping it up with me about my Padres, who are playing the Dodgers tonight. God willing, we go to the World Series. And then I got, obviously, Louis J. Gomez, Dave Smith, Dave Attell. Like, the whole room is just filled up, and Tim Dillon's just screaming crazy conspiracy shit over by the bar. It's just the greatest. It's the greatest experience ever. I can't even describe it as anything other than that. So amazing.
He's still just sitting there on Clubhouse talking about it. Thanks so much for hanging out, man.
Yeah,
I
it was
really
a blast.
appreciate you taking a couple of minutes to come over
Absolutely.
here.
Absolutely. I love stretching into areas I don't often talk about. So I hope I brought a unique angle to it.
Awesome. You really did. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Again, check out the Liberty Lockdown. Hit the subscribe, like, and notification button on the Bid Nerds thing. And check us out, I don't know, tomorrow or the next day, whatever. I'll be back with Michael Deeb talking about the cars. Thanks for hanging out, guys.
No!